Meeting of the Newman City Council, Newman Redevelopment Agency, regular meeting for March 13th. To order, please. And we could all stand and for the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for the invocation. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. John?
Yeah, please help us find the wisdom, courage, and common sense to make the right decisions to lead the city of Newman into the future. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Put your way back there. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Parker, Applegate,
Present.
Martinez,
Present.
Fantasia,
Present.
Chairperson, no, Mayor Reed.
Present.
You got demoted.
I'm glad I'm the only one that's not confused. Our first thing on the agenda this evening is it's a ceremonial matter, and this is March 11th through the 17th is Portuguese Immigration Week, and we have, maybe you newer people aren't familiar, we have a lot of Portuguese in this community who have, most of them have not immigrated, but their parents or grandparents have. And Irma Santos has been kind enough to come up with a little historical sketch of this. And would you like to come up to the podium, Irma?
I'm Irma Sanis. I live at 1542 Hallowell Road. It is my pleasure to be here tonight to tell you about the immigration of the American people. Portugal was a country that contributed the most to the geographical knowledge of our globe. In a course of a century, Portugal discovered and explored nearly 2/3 of our inhabited globe. A Portuguese navigator discovered the Azores Islands in the early 15th century. It was named Azores because of the many hawks that were circling the islands. There are a number of 9 islands in the Azores. The climate is marvelous because of the Gulf streams that warm the water of the Atlantic Ocean as it flows past the Azores. Everywhere you look, there is green foliage. These islands are on volcanic rock with a small amount of excellent topsoil covering them. Throughout the centuries, though, the Portuguese people have had to survive volcanic action that sometimes covered whole houses, and violent earthquakes which time and again destroyed villages, often by complete burial. Terrible hurricanes would come out of the North Atlantic and wipe out whole crops. There were strong winds that would attack the grapevines, leaving them open for disease. It would cripple the wine production for the European markets, as well as all kinds of delicious fruit that once was abundant in the Azores for export. These, coupled with the sad fact that the Azores were vastly ignored by the mainland, left these people facing a very sad destiny. In the rural areas of Azores, there were few or no elementary schools in the early 1900s, so most were uneducated. The land was poorly divided, leaving the working population a status of forever renting the land. They had to work in order to support their large families. They paid fees and royalties in the form of shares of their crops that were called for in the agreement and leases of the landlords. The Azorians wished they could settle in the wealthy Portuguese possessions of Angola and Mozambique in Africa, but they ended up going to America, for it was easier to go there than to their own countries' overseas provinces. These Azorean people had experienced the worst. Therefore, they were ready to adopt to any new situation, no matter how difficult it was. They left everything behind, hoping to come back and enjoy the peace and beauty of those rocky islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Most never did. They immigrated to America by the thousands, poor, timid, and often illiterate. But they possess a strong will to conquer and better themselves economically. Their departure from the islands was at times considered a blessing, both for those who ventured into the unknown and those that stayed behind. For those that were left behind were relieved of the ever-growing population that was confined to limited space and resources. Jobs left by those who immigrated were absorbed by the many unemployed. Immigration represented a source of income for the immigrants would send to the islands much of their savings to pay for debts incurred prior to departure or simply to help support family members who could not earn enough to live on. These people are hardworking. The family, church, community, and religious celebrations are the cornerstones of the Portuguese traditions. They are excellent agricultural people, fishermen, and courageous whale hunters. In their islands, men would stand on the high rocks and watch for whales. When one was spotted, he would blow a whistle and yell, "Whale, whale," very loud, of course, and the men below would run and get into their boats, and together they would throw out their harpoons and bring the whale to shore. Many of the immigrants were young boys of 16 to 18 years of age. The islands were overcrowded, and it was becoming a problem for the government of Lisbon. The government of Lisbon decided to solve this problem by drafting every young man in the Azores at the age of 18 and sending him off to fight in Africa. Needless to say, this was not popular. So the young Azorean boys started signing up as crew members on the American whaling ships that would come into shore. These boys knew how to harpoon whales, handle the oars, cut up strips of blubber, and render it, for they were raised fishermen and farmers. Almost all the men signed up on the whaling ships. Conditions on these ships were miserable. You had to work 2 or more years to earn your passage to America. Many jumped ship in American ports for freedom. Many of the men would work as crew members on the American ships when they entered the American ports. So many Portuguese boys worked on the ferries that the Americans used to call the ferries the Portuguese Navy. Sometimes whole families traveled the ocean on a line steamer, and they were treated also badly. They were given third-class quarters below deck in the hold of the ship. The steamers knew that the immigrants would not be repeat customers, so anything went. There were no portholes to look out. The women and children were assigned to one compartment of the ship and the men to another. There were tiers of bunks, 3 high along the walls. A long passageway was between the bunks, the bathrooms, if you can call it that, with chamber pots at one end of the passageway and tables where you ate at the other end. The stench from the chamber pots was awful. On the floor was about 6 inches of sawdust for seasickness. The sounds from the engine created a constant racket. When the storm came upon the ocean, the ship would pitch so hard that people fell out of their bunks. When the ship crested on the high wave, the propellers came out of the water and would vibrate the ship so hard it felt like the ship was going to tear in pieces. There were no stabilizers on the ships in those days. They had to travel 3,000 miles on the Atlantic Ocean like that to reach America. These people came to America beginning in 1880 on our East Coast and continued in large numbers until the 1920s. In the early 1920s, they came to California and started to settle on the west side. They were seeking a better life and heard that California was a land of milk and honey. They heard land was available there, and if a man worked hard and saved his money, Someday he could own a piece of the land. This dream was impossible on the Azore Islands. Azorans formed kinship networks and organized themselves in geographical groups of people that lived in the same island. They would be directed to people of their same village. In these familiar groups, the immigrants would find those who practiced the same customs, spoke the same language, and were able to give them a start in this new country. This made it less traumatic for the newly arrived immigrant. The steamers carried the people to New York, while the whaling ships carried the men laborers to Monterey Bay. This is where many abandoned ship. They were shot at, but things were so hard on the ship, they wanted off no matter what. On the west side, the large farms were sometimes as many as 3,000 acres, were starting to be broken into smaller ones. Alfalfa and clover was being raised to fatten the cattle. Dairying was to become the chief occupation on the west side. Now was the opportunity for the Portuguese to realize their dreams of buying land and starting a dairy. These Azorans became known as the plowers of fields. They had finally returned to their heritage of farming. On each ranch there was a windmill that pumped water into storage tanks for the cattle and for domestic use. Dairy barns, small houses, and trees marked where there was a farm. The Portuguese in the community were not accepted, as they did not speak the language and had few skills that education brings. In time, the immigrants were accepted, but it took great effort. They formed organizations to bring their Portuguese heritage together and stay united. Their lodges, fraternities, and festas were their social events in America. Once they bought land and settled, some were able to send for their relatives they had left behind in the old country. These people made it through determination and hard work. To buy their land, the Azorans had to borrow money from the bank or from an individual. If they missed just one payment, they lost their land. It was a hard deal. Newman had a Portuguese-American Bank of San Francisco. The bank stood at the intersection of O and Fresno Street. It was where Mel's Liquor and Sporting Goods stands today. Many of the Portuguese immigrants pulled their children out of school after the 8th grade to join other family members to tend to the dairy chores. The children had to milk by hand the cows before attending school, and then after school they had to milk cows again. They also had to shock hay, feed the animals, and separate milk. A hand crank machine was used to separate the milk from the cream. It was the cream they sold. Today they sell the whole milk, not just cream. Horses or mules provided the plow to pull implements in the fields. A familiar name to us today is the St. George Hotel. It is full of rich history. This stately building was built in 1903 by Portuguese men. They were immigrants from the Isle of St. George. They named the hotel after their island. One of the men, Joe Alves, a director of the First National Bank, owner of the Newman dry goods store. Some of the historic items in St. George were imported from the Azores. These items are the stained glass windows, mahogany bar, a beautiful tile floor, and a tin plate ceilings. This hotel was built with pride. One early Portuguese immigrant was named Frank Avelar. He came from Azores in 1892. He left his mother, brother, and sister behind. Frank set off for America in a 16-foot sailboat with 3 other fellows, one being a navigator. They left illegally at night, and they ran into pirates on the sea and had to lay flat in the bottom of the boat, for the pirates were shooting at them. They ran out of food and had to fish and kill birds to eat. It took them 3 months on the water to reach the East Coast and enter America illegally. They could not speak the language and had to use sign language to get what they needed. Frank stayed on the East Coast a while, and then he journeyed to Nevada, where he tended sheep for 1 year, and then made his way to San Francisco. There he attended barber school. He journeyed to Newman because of a cousin who lived here. His cousin, J.C. Avalar, was the first president of the FDS Portuguese fraternity. Frank settled in Newman and was the first barber in the St. George Hotel. The immigration of the Portuguese people continued at a steady pace until the Depression years. Then quotas were imposed, limiting only 400 Portuguese immigrants per year. These quotas remained in effect until 1959. In 1959, special legislation was sponsored by President Kennedy because of a major volcanic eruption on the island of Fial. This special legislation allowed 2,000 immigrants per year to come to the United States. After that, immigration continued at a higher rate. Now the Portuguese government has slowed immigration to keep the people there. Recently, the Portuguese immigration is beginning to reverse itself, and people are coming into the islands. They are beginning to return to the land of their birth, especially in their retirement years. They are now financially secure. The people in the Azores Islands today are not rich, but they have enough to live comfortably. Social life there still centers around the family and older traditions. Change for the sake of change is not held in great esteem by the people. Life was hard for the Azorean immigrants, but America has rewarded them well. There are still many people of Portuguese descent living in Newman and the surrounding area. Newman's ethnic makeup continues to change, as it is a melting pot that is truly America. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irma. Irma is our museum attendant. If any of you have never been to the museum, you ought to stop by sometime. There's some really interesting things in there. And are these other ladies back there volunteers to the Historical Society, or they just come to give you moral support?
They're my hecklers.
That's good. I'm glad to. Okay. Thanks again. And I do have a proclamation I want to read real quick here. This is Proclamation of the Mayor of the City of Newman. Whereas the City of Newman is fortunate to have many citizens of Portuguese descent who have contributed to growth and development in our community, and whereas these citizens have exhibited a great deal of pride and appreciation in their community and have always been willing to render their time and talent for the betterment of Newman, and whereas included among their many contributions are the cultural and traditional aspects which they have so freely shared, thereby enhancing our society and providing a basis for better understanding and cooperation among our citizens. And whereas the week of March 11th, March 17th, 2001 has been established by tradition as Portuguese Immigrant Week, and the City of Newman wishes to join its Portuguese citizenry, boy, this is terrible, in commemoration of this week. Now, therefore, I, David Reed, Mayor of the City of Newman, do hereby proclaim the week of March 11th, March 17th, 2001 as Portuguese Immigrant Week in the City of Newman. Thank you. Next, communications by staff.
Mr. Mayor, may we have the record reflect that I am present?
I see you, yeah. Okay, yeah,
Just put a voice on it.
Timothy, we have that. Did you caught in the traffic over there?
I've been caught up in a lot of different things lately, but I'm here.
Okay, I'm glad to see that. Any communications from staff?
I don't believe there are any tonight.
None? Okay. Items from public, non-agenda items. While the City Council welcomes and encourages participation in the meetings, it would be appreciated if you would limit your comments to 3 minutes so that everyone may be heard. Matters under the jurisdiction of the Council and not on a posted agenda may be addressed by the general public at this time. However, California law prohibits the Council from taking action on any matter which is not on the posted agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the City Council. Any non-agenda items anyone wants to talk about? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know whether I should bring this up now or later, but I would like to know what has happened to the walkway between Westside Village and Nob Hill, the back end.
Would you like to step up to the podium and state your name so that we appreciate it? That way it can get on the record.
Okay. Okay.
If you state your name and address, why?
I'm Phyllis Guidi, and I'm a representative of Westside Village, your new, very lovely apartment, low income. And we were told when we moved in that they were soon going to have a walkway between Nob Hill Grocery, the back end, and the back end of our little village with a walkway. And I would like to know if there's anything in the works about this. I have talked with the night manager, Miguel, and he said they are hoping, because the weather has stopped this progression of the walkway into Nob Hill and the back end of instead of going all the way around. And so we are very concerned as to what has happened. And he said that there was the weather that was holding it up, and also they are negotiating with Westside Village and Nob Hill and going to share somehow the expenses. Could you bring any light on this?
Cleve, do you know anything about this? Or?
I don't know where that is in the works. We would have to look into that. I know it is still planned to be done, as far as I know. I have heard nothing to say that it is not to be done, and but we can check into that and get an answer back to you.
This is between
Great. I'll be here.
Okay.
This is between the developer and Nob Hill.
Westside Village, yeah.
City's not
Yeah.
involved in this stuff.
Nob Hill said that they were most anxious to have it started.
Okay.
It means a big boon for them.
We'll see what we can find out. Thank you
Okay,
very much
and
for
when
coming.
will you tell me?
We should be able to get an answer to you. We will, probably as early as tomorrow, we can find it somewhat what the
Okay.
status is of that.
My
and we'll-
number is 862-2711.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other non-agenda items? Items from the public, agenda items. Any member of the audience desiring to address the council on a matter of the agenda, please raise your hand or step to the podium at the time the item is announced by the mayor. In order that all interested parties have an opportunity to speak, any person addressing the council would be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes unless the mayor grants a longer period of time. And at that time, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Public hearings, we have none. Consent calendar. A is approval of warrants. B is approval of minutes of the February 13th regular meeting.
23rd.
20. We
Mine
didn't have a
says
meeting.
23rd and 27th.
Pardon?
Mine says 13th.
We didn't have a meeting.
Had one meeting last month.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Item 9C, adopt resolution number 2001, next number, is authorizing approval of the statement of investment policy for the city of Newman. Item 9D, authorize budget amount for depreciation transfer for 2001-2002 fiscal year. And item 9E, approval of indicator project center billing from Stanislaus County. Do we have any direction on the consent calendar?
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Item 10, regular business. Adopt resolution number 2001, next number, a resolution execution of agreement for execution improvements is conditioned to approval of final subdivision map of Stevens Ranch 1 subdivision. Cleve, you want to handle that?
I have a handout that I need to give you. There is one part that was left out of this agreement that we need to expand on, and the second page of this handout clarifies that. The dollar amounts need to be added based on the engineer's estimate that will be provided. Yeah, Tom?
Actually, I was looking at this again, what we'll do on paragraph 3, security, will delete that and then include the first sentence from the handout that you have here. The second,
So we're looking at paragraph 3, the first sentence regarding the attachment address and reimbursements.
right. Well,
Where exactly are we striking?
on
What page?
on the draft agreement in your agenda,
On the original draft.
yeah, right.
Yes.
It's on page 5,
Okay.
item number 3.
Yeah, I call it
Security.
for- The security section will delete that and then include the first sentence from what we just handed out, and that basically says, in order to ensure the full and faithful performance of this agreement, subdivider shall file with this agreement a letter of credit or other form of improvement security acceptable to the city in an amount equal to, and that'll be determined by the city engineer, and labor and materials bond or other form of improvement security acceptable to the city in a like amount.
Can we just include that whole paragraph?
Well, the next part actually was covered in part 9 of the agreement.
Of the agreement, so that's not necessary.
Taking
Oh,
this-
that's the
the rest of
security
that
part,
sentence out.
okay. The warranty part,
No,
okay. So that's,
And then after that has a reference to trees, and I don't think we...
okay, you're
Okay, but
correct.
as with the amendments as we're suggesting now, it makes this binding once we seek to approve it or disapprove it, correct?
Right.
That's correct.
So I wanna be
Provided
cer- I
Mr.
wanna be-
Stevens agrees and
Okay.
whoever else we need to get.
One other note just to make on the resolution, at the beginning of, prior to the agreement, this should read Ranchwood Homes rather than Ranchwood Contractors. Just a minor thing there. And that's several times throughout the agreement, or the resolution, but anyway, it should read Ranchwood Homes rather than Ranchwood Contractors. Just a little background, this project has been before us for a while. Originally, it's my understanding that the developer was going to do all the improvements, and therefore this agreement would not have been necessary. However, due to the fact that the developers come back and asked to phase this project in, there will be basically two phases of Unit 1, which we know as Stevens 1. And because of that, it does require the bonding and the subdivision improvement agreement as you have before you. Those are the basic things. It's a pretty standard subdivision improvement agreement. Any questions you have, Mr. Stevens is here tonight to answer those that you might have of him. They have plans, improvement plans being checked at this time. In fact, they're close to being approved. The total package was already approved, actually. However, when they came back and phased it, we had to recheck those to make sure that the phasing could stand alone, and that's where those are at right now. It's my understanding that there's no big problem, and those will be approved. That's basically it, unless there's anything else you would like us to go over in this agreement.
I would just like to ask the other question, if I could. It appears that you're going to defer because you want to phase it, so you're going to defer the project where it will be stretched out a little longer.
That really is a market situation, and you know, we think we're going to go right through this project. One of the reasons for the phasing was that we have another 30 acres to the south of this that require, and that's part of the whole entryway to the whole subdivision, and we were not able to exercise that option on that phase without getting some, you know, showing some progress to our bank, you know, as far as being able to sell homes here. But we're anticipating going right through this.
Okay, thank you.
Doug, you don't have to get back up again. I have a question on this. On this, the parkland is going to double as a storm retention. Will that be, and that is a total of 5 acres in your, in there. Is that all going to be done at once, or will that be done in your phases too? As to
You want me to answer that, Doug? If you'd like, yeah, since you're not at the microphone. It will actually be done in 2 phases, and you can see that it's required in here after about the 50th. The occupancy permit is issued for the 50th home in phase 1. They have to supply us with plans for the park, which we will approve, and then the park has to be built before the 114th home occupancy permit is issued for the entire project. So, and that was put in there in case for some reason they decide to start on the second half of it. At least 2.5 acres of the park have to be built prior to the occupancy permit of that 114th unit being issued. So
well, that was why I couldn't quite understand that, whether since it is partly a storm retention, that you could do half of that and still, just make one basic retention basin, and then when you get to the other 2.5 acres, just knock the one end out and enlarge that into the 5.
yeah,
basin is there now.
Okay.
the 2.5 acre basin
Yeah.
is there now, right?
And then
yeah.
when you get into the next one to make it the complete 5, you just take one end out of it and continue it on back.
And we're anxious to complete it because we consider it an enhancement to our ability to sell homes, and it's called Park Estates, and
Yeah.
we kind of focus on that park as a
Yeah, that's one thing I'd like to see, is that we get these parks in there instead of waiting 5 or 10 years after these subdivisions are built before the park ever gets in there. So
Just for your information, our initial discussions and our intentions on the park for this subdivision is that the developer will actually build it as part of this process, and you see the language in the agreement which requires that. We have set that partially in motion. I prepared a fee letter to go to the developer, which states that the requirements we're recommending approval of, and this will come back to you at a later date to agree on these amounts, but $30,000 an acre as the price for the land. However, in this case, since it doubles as a detention basin, we've initially agreed on 50% reimbursement for the dedication of the land rather than the full $30,000. So that comes to the $15,000 an acre. We've looked at $48,000 per acre as the improvement cost for a level 1 park, and we've agreed with them to reimburse for the development of the park up to $48,000 for improvements to the level 1. For the 2.5 acres, those total costs come out to $37,500 for the land, $120,000 for the improvements, for a total of $157,500. The total fee for the initial 113 homes is what I put. I forget, it's 113, 114. It comes to 113 homes times $1,600 comes out to $180,800, leaving a balance of $23,300 that they would end up paying, which goes into our park fund to be used towards regional parks and et cetera as part of that. So that's the way we've calculated the initial fees and how the park will end up being built.
And just real quickly, could you explain to people out in the other land out there what a level 1 park is, so that
a level 1 park is just the very basic. What we are talking to all of our developers about is having them draw up a master plan for each one of the parks as they come in, which will show actually a level 2 park. A level 1 park basically includes your turf, irrigation system, and some trees around the park. It's very basic, and that's the way our fee structure is currently set up, is only to pay for a level 1 park. There is nothing to stop. The reason we wanted to have the level 2 park designed is we anticipate that as time goes on, we will try to put additional improvements in there. There's also nothing to stop the developer from putting additional improvements in themselves if they want to. But what we've agreed to reimburse for is just up to the level 1.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this? Can we have some direction?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt Resolution 2001 next to number approving a subdivision improvement agreement with Ranchwood Homes for phasing of the Stevens Ranch 1 subdivision with the outlined changes in the improvement security as said.
Can we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Opposed? Passes 5-0. Item 10B, informational report on handling parking near fire hydrants. Mike, you want to take that?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I just want to give you a small background, see where we've been. We started out on January 23rd, City Council meeting with Mr. Byrd, a resident of our city, addressed City Council on being able to park in front of his home. Senator received a parking ticket for parking too close to a fire hydrant. He asked that the council look into the matter, and it was referred to Fire Chief Souza and I. At the February 13th council meeting, staff recommended that the 15-foot requirement to be maintained around fire hydrants. Mr. Byrd at that point told the council that this is not only his problem, but a problem for many residents in and around his area, and for them not being able to park to the front of their home. He also felt that the 15-foot or 30-foot length, it's 15 foot on either side of a fire hydrant, and in his opinion was excessive for the fire department. They could do the job in much less area. He said that this was in other parts of the town, that some of the parking for around fire hydrants are not consistently applied throughout the community. There are shorter red zones in other parts of town. The council wanted a policy standardizing the distance from fire hydrants that would be acceptable for the fire department to conduct fire suppression. Public Works Director Ernie Garza informed the council that the red curbs that were currently in place were done by overzealous community volunteers on a project just to paint fire hydrants, and that they were not authorized to paint the curbs, although they did so. The council wanted to have Fire Chief Souza state just how much area is needed around fire hydrants for adequate fire suppression activities. I think kind of from there, I think it's just important to kind of find out really what the law provides for. And this is found in section 22.514 of the California Vehicle Code. And the section B is the one that we really need to address, and basically I'll go ahead and read that. Section B reads that if the local authority adopts an ordinance or resolution reducing this distance, and that the distance is less than 10 feet in total length when measuring along the curb edge of the street, the distance shall be indicated by signs or markings. The common practice is to paint these curbs red. That's the markings that they're speaking of. We also researched, as you see here, that these have to be by ordinance or resolution. So we went back to find out just what we had in our code that was adopted by ordinances or resolutions, and we found that in the last 30 years we haven't had anything that's come before council and been ratified. And then I contacted Fire Chief Souza again to find out just how much space that he felt would be needed to properly conduct fire suppression in relation to parking of cars near these fire hydrants. He submitted a letter, but basically it's that he would like to have the 15-foot on either side of the fire hydrants to be maintained. I then contacted various cities just to find out just exactly how they applied and if they had a standardized policy. Basically, I found that there wasn't really a standardized policy, but they did have guidelines that they followed throughout many of the cities. And the common themes is what I was looking at here. I'll read out the common things that they had put down. A commercial area. They were saying that in commercial zones, that's where that's where they pretty much put the red zones, because of the high traffic volume and area, and that they do not usually allow red zones in residential areas. The other factors they looked at was the high traffic volumes, and that they would like to keep the 15-foot radius around these fire hydrants in high traffic volume areas, because they could get keep the traffic flowing, but keep the trucks closer to the curb, so they could keep the area free from traffic pileups and things of that nature. The other thing that they looked at was corner locations, and that was one of the areas that we were looking at specifically. And they were looking at that in those particular instances that they may reduce the in low traffic volume areas, that they would reduce that area, because they could use the full intersection along with along in that corner area, because there's not much traffic to be interrupted, and they'd be able to have the whole section blocked off for the fire trucks to be able to utilize. The other factor they looked at was visual obstructions. If there was if parking so close to this hydrant would cause any kind of a visual obstruction for a motorist. That was one of the factors they took into account. And one of their, I guess kind of you might call it a rule of thumb, was that they very seldom went below 5 feet on either side of a hydrant. So, and if they did, what they do is they try and pick that up on the other side of the hydrant. So if they went 5 feet on one, they might go with the full 15 on the other side, or they might just go 5 feet, just depending on all the factors that come into play. The other one is that the standard stall length for a car, according to the Caltrans, which are pretty much the experts in traffic, is 20 feet. And as I said, most cities, last factor is basically most cities have a recommendation that's completed by a traffic engineer. But in smaller cities, we were finding that it was either done by the police chief or public works director that does this, and that a recommendation is actually signed off by all three of these individuals. So, so that each area of their expertise could be addressed, and they'd be aware of it. If there's anything that had to be, that the others didn't know about, that they could actually make another recommendation to account for those things. The other thing I looked at was the impact as far as the cost would be. We're looking at that there are 231 fire hydrants within the city that would have to be reviewed. If the council chose to reduce the distance to less than 15 feet, there'd be a cost to paint the red zones, and that would be approximately $50. And that would be approximately every 2 years, because the paints that they have to utilize cannot have lead pigments, and it doesn't wear as long as some others. The other factor is that you'd have to put these into the code itself. So you'd be trying to codify these things, and there'd be staff time involved with that. Also, removing of the existing red zones would cost about $100 each, because there's sandblasting and other things that would have to take place to be able to get those off. An alternative would be to have the police department enforce the existing red zones and let the red zones deteriorate and be eliminated by natural erosion. That'd be for approximately a 2-year period of time. This would be least expensive and would not pose a problem for the motorist. The recommendation I have would still not address Mr. Bird's problem, though, because basically if we go by the guidelines that we've put in place here, it would not rectify the situation that he is currently in, where he has 22 feet from his driveway approach to the fire hydrant. If we look at the stall length that Caltrans puts, that's 20 feet. That would only leave 2 feet. The other guideline they have is basically not to go under 5 feet, and that would only leave us about 2 feet. So that still would not rectify that situation, and that compounds with at least just with the information that he provided, that there was at least 20 such locations that would be affected with this. So with that, I made for your approval here to look at some alternatives and maybe come with a something that may work here for number one, standardizing the how these hydrants are done, these red zones, and and how we would go about that. So first alternative is basically that we stay with the standard of 15 feet from the fire hydrant as recommended by the fire chief, have the existing red zones deteriorate and be enforced in 2 years. Again, that would keep the cost down, and that would account for our standardization. We could stay with the state standard and address each individual complaints with the guidelines used by other cities. If the red zones are under 15 feet, be and authorized, they would be there'd be an ordinance that would come before you or a resolution only, or we could set any other ordinance or resolution with the criteria for any considerations that you feel that would be deemed necessary, or we could do any combination of the above. With that, I'll take any kind of questions you may have. I have Fire Chief Souza's letters of the 7th, February 7th, and February 21st.
Any questions of Mike?
I actually have a couple of questions. My first question would be in regards to the cost considerations. Where did you come up and factor in the $50 per hydrant? I assessed that as a little over $11,500, which I find excessive. So how did you factor in that cost? Is that how much that particular paint costs?
I asked an expert, Mr. Garza.
You're deferring that.
And I will defer it to him for the cost.
Because the reason why I ask, and perhaps Fire Chief Souza can answer this question, recently after Mr. Bird approached us regarding the parking in front of his home and the parking citation regarding the curves, I noticed that all the fire hydrants in the city were painted brightly red. I actually saw a gentleman in my neighborhood that was out doing that, and so I figured you would be able to get a cost guesstimate. I don't know if this gentleman volunteered to do it or if he was paid to do it and the city provided the paint, but I'm pretty certain that it didn't met out to be an excessive or exorbitant amount of what I'm viewing in his staff report. So if you will.
That's just a guesstimate as to how much it's going to cost to especially remove the red paint from the curbing. You're going to have to rent a machine. There's going to be a lot of sandblasting. It's going to take a couple of people to do it. One to operate the machine and somebody else to try to protect the cars or anything that could get hit by the flying sand. And then, of course, all your cleanup. So that's just as best guesstimate as I could get.
Okay, that's for actually eradicating the red curb zone. But for actually painting them, would it actually be $50 per curb, per fire hydrant? I find that exorbitant. I don't see where it would cost that much money. I don't know what the paint costs, and I know you're probably factoring in labor time. However, like I said, all those fire hydrants are I just saw a bunch of fire hydrants recently painted red. I don't know whether or not the gentleman volunteered this time, but I'm certain there's people in this community. We talked about volunteers that were children or kids that kind of did it haphazardly. If there is somebody to supervise that, I'm certain that whatever the council and my colleagues' pleasure, what we do, that if it does result in some painting of curves, which would give us some flexibility if we have a resolution by ordinance, that it wouldn't be such an exorbitant cost. Because you said, as you just gave me, there was a guesstimate, so
Yes,
I'm guessing
yes,
that
yeah.
it could be much lower than what we actually see.
It could be lower. I'm not saying that those are dead set figures. We're
Okay.
just trying to determine as to, the cost of the paint is I believe it could be somewhere around 25 gallons, dollars per gallon of paint. And then, of course, the time for the person to go out there, the vehicle that's used, the gas, the time tracking, taking all those things into consideration. It's not just the actual...
Right, I understand that.
Okay.
And that's if we were using all city employees, correct?
Right. And again, This would have to be contracted out because we have such a limited workforce. And right now it's a very busy time of the year with the weeds and parks and baseball and everything going. So they would be contracted out, and I do know that it wouldn't come cheap. But again, it's just a guesstimate.
Mike, no matter what we do, this will not alleviate Mr. Bird's problem, right?
If you go by the guidelines that that other cities that have utilized, that's.
But we'd have to go down to 4 feet or less to,
Well, it depends. Again, you'd have to the stall size that they're talking about for a car to park is 20 feet. So that's
right.
If you choose, there's nothing set in stone that you have to stay with that. I'm just telling you that's the state standard by Caltrans. If you felt a car could go under that, that would be.
But in order to accommodate his problem, how far down would we have to go?
I believe we estimated, what, 17 feet, Mr.?
I measured the length of the car. The car is 17 feet, and if you go 5 feet on one side of the hydrant, 20 feet to the other side.
Let me have Fire Chief Mel Souza address that, because I want my colleagues to know I took the time to drive around the city. I went to the fire department recently and spoke with the fire chief, talked to some of his crew, and some of the questions I asked was regarding what was it that they needed. In most instances, I believe it is that you use a 2-inch hose when you hook.
You can use a 2.5 or a 3-inch.
2.5, 3-inch hose. One of the things that Fire Chief Souza did relay to me in this staff report and the information and research that he did, you spoke of the fact that if indeed we were able to, in some instances, at a discretion through you and the police chief, paint some curves, that you could actually paint 3.5 feet on one side and extend it to 8 feet or 7 feet on the other side. Is that
That's true.
correct?
You can paint the curb, as long as you got 10 feet. You can paint 7 on one side of the hydrant and 3 on the other. As long as you got the 10 feet.
Okay.
Red curb.
And that would that suffice in many instances for you to be able to bring a rig and hook up a hose to put out a fire?
Yeah, that still gives us enough room, yes.
Okay.
But you related to me earlier that you would rather have the 15 feet.
Well, if the curb is painted, that's what you get. It's at 10 feet, which you get if the curb is painted red. If it's not painted, you get 15 feet, if it's not painted. But if it's painted red, then you have to maintain it all the times. But you can have, if it's not painted, you can have 15 feet on either side of the curb, the hydrant, excuse me, the hydrant, if it's not painted.
Quite sure each resident that has a fire hydrant in front of his house would keep them a gallon of paint just so they can keep that.
Let me ask the police chief a question. And this is going to be kind of a poignant question. It's going to be real direct. Because this instance, this has come and it's evolved from a parking ticket. Just what is the policy for traffic enforcement for the City of Newman Police in terms of residential areas for parking ticket enforcement? I know the people are given parking citations for perhaps driving and parking on the wrong side of the curb, in other words, the wrong direction. Perhaps sometimes if their vehicle is too far away from the curb, they have to park within 18 inches. People are given parking tickets. And in this instance, that came to our attention. Mr. Bird was given a parking ticket, or a vehicle that was parked in front of his home was given a parking ticket for being parked within 15 feet of a fire hydrant. And so my directed question is, what is that policy and what is the selective enforcement ideal behind it? Because I personally saw at least 20 different vehicles that were parked within these guidelines of the 15 feet that would have been in violation. So how is that? Is it simply at the officer's discretion? Or?
It's at the officer's discretion. We don't have them going around with measuring tapes. Obviously, with this car being parked there, that would put it within 5 feet, which would be visually you'd be able to tell the difference between 5 feet.
Well, all the
15
vehicles
feet.
I was able to look at, you can look at and see that they are definitely in violation. Some of them were 3 feet, 5 feet, definitely not more than 15 feet. So is that the officer's discretion?
Yes, it is.
So in other words, some of this resolve too, we're looking at a ordinance policy, but there also could be policy in terms of citation enforcement, parking citation enforcement.
I guess I'd be saying, are you telling us, I'd tell my officers not to enforce?
No, I'm not telling you, no, of course not. I'm saying in terms of policy towards enforcement.
Our policy towards enforcement is actually the spirit of the law. We don't try and go by the letter of the law, and I think that's how we treat either moving and parking violations. So, but I don't tell the officers not to enforce.
Well, I wouldn't want you to tell officers not to enforce any law that's on the road, but I would want you to certainly instill what you just spoke about, the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. That's something that I convey here, and I probably conveyed it more than once. But I wanted to ask that question because you as a police chief certainly have the wherewithal with the enforcement policies. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wish we were more consistent sometimes.
Anyone else have any comments? Sure. Mr. Byrd, sure.
I'm Ralph Byrd, the person in question, and I live at 606 Waxwing Lane, and I was just listening to what the fire chief just stated, that 10 feet would be sufficient for him to adequately do his job, and all I was asking for was 5 feet off, say like 5 feet to one side of the fire hydrant, and he could have the whole other side of the block, as far as I'm concerned. He could paint that whole side over the red. I mean, that will be more than substantial. And as stated before, it doesn't only affect me, it affects quite a few other people, and I'm quite sure they will be willing to relinquish the corner, the other side, you know. And I can't understand why our fire department wouldn't be able to put out a fire in any area with that amount of space. I mean, they're on a corner. The majority of them are on a corner. So where is the problem with cutting it down to 5 feet?
The problem is the maintenance issue, Mr. Byrd. That is the total problem, and that's why if you talk to every city that I would guess that Mr. Or Chief Brady talked to, they would explain that the reason they do not do this is due to the maintenance of maintaining those red curbs. It's just a standard policy almost in every city. It's you avoid putting in red curbs in any area if at all possible. And again, it's because of the maintenance issue.
Kept the curb up.
Pardon?
How about if the resident kept the curb up?
Can you guarantee me that every resident that I do this to will
Resident, but I can guarantee you I would.
Well, and that's the problem. I understand that you would, and I appreciate that.
What type of guarantee would you want me to give you?
You may not live there all the time.
Sign something saying that yes, I will keep.
It would be a guarantee such that would state that
if
it's not maintained, that we would have the right to go out and maintain it in a fashion that it should be and bill you for it.
And charge them for it.
Yeah.
But what if you're not living there 6 months from now?
Then that's on the next person in the house.
Yeah, but what if they don't want to guarantee it? Then we're back taking care of it again? Right?
I kind of beg to differ on this issue in terms of a resounding word that I was hearing: a problem, a problem, a problem. I don't see it as a problem. I see it as something that can be resolved. Certainly, sitting here behind this dais with my colleagues, I think that we can mediate and perhaps give some direction to staff to come up with a resolution or ordinance that would give us some discretionary measures to say when and if a curb in front of a residence would be painted. I'm not looking for a semblance to paint 231 curbs throughout the city of Newman. I'm looking for an ordinance that would give us the flexibility that if there is a definite issue that could be meted out between the fire chief and the police chief, to provide the adequate necessary space in order to be able to adequately access a fire hydrant to put out a fire, that we can kind of mesh in our residential neighborhoods, people being able to park in front of their homes. Now, the fire hydrants that are already in place is why we have this issue before us. The new developments that come in, obviously, with the planning of that, we'll need to look at it closely where fire hydrants are going to be placed. And I wouldn't be making these comments if I hadn't been going around and looking at it for myself with my own eyes, because I don't think I would be able to speak intelligently about it. But because that I did, and I saw the numerous amount of vehicles that are actually in violation, and we've had some enforcement of it, then I think it's our responsibility to not view it as such as a problem, but to be able to resolve it. And that's just conveying my opinion on this subject matter, and I would hope that my colleagues would hear that with some semblance of that we could come to the table with a resolution.
I see it as, say, 15 minutes worth of work and a gallon of paint. I paid $14,000 in taxes this year. I think $25 gallon of paint can be taken out of that $14,000 somewhere.
That's federal income tax.
Right.
It doesn't come here.
Some of it.
Okay, I think we've, unless you have something else to say, Mr. Byrd, I think we've pretty well gone through this. Anyone have any ideas what they would like to do with it?
Well, I like Mike's paragraph G, giving it over to Public Works, the Police Department, and the Fire Department for their recommendations.
Well,
And that's the way it
I
should
think
be. I
we
don't
pretty well
even
have
see
the
why it came up
recommendations here.
Huh?
I think we pretty well have the recommendations here as far
Right,
as
G.
the fire department goes for G. All right, what's your pleasure?
That's my pleasure.
Anyone else have any comments?
Well, the only comment I have, why is it that we have to paint all the areas by fire hydrants? There's 231 supposedly in our city.
You wouldn't have to.
That's what I'm saying. We wouldn't have to. So the only ones we'd be talking about painting are those ones that have a problem.
Correct.
So the cost wouldn't be as great as what we're talking about.
Well, I don't think, the $50 per hydrant, I don't know if that's the exact cost, but that's.
Well, I'm sure it's not,
But
it's a
we
pretty
don't
good
know
number.
how many numbers.
I think it's a good number.
I think it is too, yeah, but.
Yeah. Could we get an idea how many we'd be talking about?
We have not surveyed how many of those fit this category. Mr. Byrd, I think you came up with approximately 20 that you said, 34. And right, in the Creek Canyon subdivision.
It was a good job.
Yeah.
It was a good job. I can see why you would let it go.
Yeah. Well, the problem is, in order to let those go, we have to adopt it by ordinance. Technically, those aren't official because according to law, they haven't been adopted by the city council as such. So that's one thing that would need to be done. But correct. That's correct.
Well, let the fire chief, the police chief, and the public works director go out and give us their recommendations and let them follow it, and then come back on the ones they feel to get their ordinance. I think that's the way it should be. You're not going to get a standard ordinance.
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Mary Remus, and I live at 1030 Orris Timber Road. This is very interesting because the city has wanted to grow and grow and grow. And as you grow, expenses come along with it. I think the city should be the one that foots this bill. If a light goes off in one of your street lights in town, are you going to let it dead? No, the city has to replace the light. I think the city is responsible for painting those curbs. Like the man said, he pays property taxes. And there's plenty of money there that he's paying out of his pocket that should be able to pay for those curbs. That is my feeling on the subject.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just for your information, where he lives, where I live, Locust Ranch, there are things in place that if a light bulb goes out, the city doesn't pay for it. We pay for it. That's the way all the new subdivisions are.
Okay, John, you're the only one who hasn't said anything. Do you have any comments on this?
Well, we don't know how many fire hydrants in the residential areas, do we? That's one thing we need to find out, huh? Probably at least half, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know.
Those would be the
couldn't tell you
ones.
how many fit this category.
Those would be the ones that need to be taken care of first.
Well,
but it is a touchy deal.
I guess what staff can do would be to go back and review the ones that fit the category that prevent people from parking in front of their homes, and bring back a number to the council explaining just detail on each one and seeing how council wants to handle
A
those.
cost estimate or something on what it would do to take care of everyone in the residential areas?
Right.
Well, let me ask this question, since we're directing staff to go back and take a look at this and we're looking at it in ordinance resolution form. Isn't there some wording where it could be at a discretion? We can empower the fire chief and the police chief if there is attention brought to a particular fire hydrant and curve in a residential neighborhood, that they can go out and make that assessment individually. Because I think what we're looking at the totality of all of the fire hydrant. If we could look at it with some wording that it wouldn't have to be. This is relaying to what Thomas said on G, bringing it back to them. But what I'm hearing is, well, are we going to have to assess every individual fire hydrant? I don't think it necessitates that. But whether we could have some wording to say that if a problem is brought to the city, that they can go out and do that surveillance and make a recommendation and act on it by way of the ordinance that may be presented to us. Is that possible?
That's what I've been saying all along here.
And perhaps if it meets certain criteria is what you're saying, Tim.
Yeah, we could have an ordinance that meets certain criteria. Fire chief goes out, police chief goes out, they take a look and say, okay, this curve, this point park, or that this curve with this fire hydrant, we're going to paint it 10 feet. It's brought to our attention, not necessitating us going and looking out and taking a survey of 231 fire hydrants, but individually when it's brought to our attention.
If that's the direction of the city council, should.
Well, that would be the direction I would like to take.
Well, I'd like to see an ordinance to memorialize paragraph G.
But I think what, and what staff would like to have too, and I see what paragraph G is saying, but we would like a little more clear direction from the council, as for example, how small do you want us to go? How small do you want us to go on each side of a fire hydrant? In order for it to make, as Mr. Councilmember Parker has stated, in order for it to be a standard, we don't want to be making those decisions out there that may not be in agreement with the council wants. So we would like to bring back a little bit more detailed criteria that would state when we would consider that.
Well, I would recommend that you go to the police chief, the fire chief, and public works director and meet with them and come up with a recommendation.
Yeah.
You want to put that in the form of a motion, Tom?
Yeah, so moved. I move that we go back to staff to adopt or to write an ordinance as to specifics for fire hydrants in conjunction with the recommendations from the public works director, police chief, and fire chief.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good. This probably won't solve that problem, but Doug, is there any possibility when they put in new subdivisions of taking X amount of feet on either side of a fire plug and using colored concrete, red colored concrete? We don't have to paint it anymore? Could be done.
Uh-oh. See?
Okay. Moving right along.
Wait a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to see the next subdivisions come in here. Let's put the fire hydrant between the property lines.
Yeah, of course, not gonna.
We discussed that
curb
before.
is on the corner.
That's what we really have to have the planning commission look at this closely when they
I
approve
think we'll
these
solve a lot of
subdivisions.
problems, I think,
Right.
those do that.
Right.
That really
Okay.
will
Totally
happen
agree.
in
Commission
the
never sees it,
improvement
though.
plan stage. Yeah.
Well, somewhere along the line, they see it before
Yeah.
we do. Okay.
Well, it'd be the
Thank you, Mel.
planning department.
Sometimes that won't work on the property line. You like to put the curb cuts for the garages in certain places and sometimes between
That's right.
property lines, so.
It depends.
Look at it.
Okay.
See, I mean, I'd like to see how the fire.
It's something to be looked at closer, I think. Okay. Item 10C, which is review streetscape bids and award bid. Unfortunately, we ran into a little problem today. Cleve, do you want to field that one?
Well, just quickly, because of an apparent clerical error in the apparent low bidder's bid, it is recommended at this time that we can't, because of that clerical error and some procedures we have to follow, we cannot award the bid tonight. If the council wants to ask any questions, I guess, regarding these, you could, but because of that clerical error, we are preparing a letter to go to the necessary subcontractors and the contractor to try and correct that. But at this time, we will not be able to award the bid.
Could you mention the meeting tonight of the Streetscape Committee and what their recommendations were?
We met with the Streetscape Committee, and their feeling was to move forward with it based on when we can with this, with the apparent low bidder. And they felt that based on funding available, if there is funding available, they did want to consider, there's still some questions that need to be answered, but they did want to consider alternate one of the bid, which is regarding the street lighting and some possible changes that might be done there. But overall, they were recommending that as soon as possible to move forward, I believe, with the project based on the bids that came in.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Cleve, since
Yes.
we can't do anything with the bids tonight, how soon can we as far as?
Like I say, I have the letter, there's some timelines, specific timelines that are spelled out. I have to get the letter out to the contractor. They then have 5 days to respond. If they do not object to the action that we're recommending or that is being proposed, then we would be able to move immediately on, at least by your next meeting. If not, trying to think of the days, possibly even by
23rd,
next
yeah.
Tuesday.
20, yeah.
Well, no, it won't make it.
No, 22nd.
Yeah, they won't have their they need five working days to
Right,
respond.
5 working.
But we could probably, if they do not object, then we could possibly do it by the 27th at your next meeting.
Time-wise, how's that put us?
We're okay. We're still okay. If they object, then it kicks into some other things. There's a hearing that has to be held to consider evidence of whether or not it truly is a clerical error, and some other provisions that we move forward on from there. So it could kick it back another couple of weeks.
And we have received the bids for the storm drain project, and those look all right. And that has to be done before the streetscape project anyway, so that can probably be approved next Tuesday.
Our plan is to present those at your meeting next Tuesday. You recall we have a special meeting to interview potential planning commissioners. And our plan is to put that on that agenda to have you approve the storm drain project at that time.
Okay, we'll now adjourn to meet as the Newman Redevelopment Agency. Could we have a roll call, please?
Board Member Parker,
Present.
Present. Present.
Present.
Chairperson Reed,
Present. Item 11B, adopt resolution number 2001, next number, authorizing approval of the statement of investment policy for the city of Newman. This is the same as item 9C that we approved earlier as the council.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Item 11C, approve $30,000 revolving business loan for Troy and Darcy Souza for businesses located at 1604 M Street.
Margaret will handle this.
Margaret, okay.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. The item before, the item before you is an application that has been submitted by Troy and Darcy Souza to participate in our revolving business loan program. They've recently purchased the property at 1604 M Street. The site has two separate businesses, which they hope to serve as two separate buildings, which should serve as two separate businesses. One is a machine shop and another a pet feed store. This project meets the primary objective of the program, which is to stimulate the economy and to eliminate blight. It will establish two businesses in a site that has been vacant for a number of years. This project has met all the parameters of the loan program. The completed application has been submitted. 3 years of financial records, including tax returns, have been filed. 2 business plans, one for each business, has also been submitted and evaluated. The building department has inspected both buildings and provided the finance department with appraisal and assessment of the work that needs to be done to occupy the site. The planning department has reviewed the location for zoning and other requirements. The planning commission has granted the approval of a conditional use permit. Staff has reviewed the financial records with our local bank to make sure that this is a sound transaction. Stipulations have been put into place to make sure that all conditions are met before the loan is granted. The staff has reviewed the loan terms and conditions with the title company. Conditions are, we need a listing of committed customers to one of the businesses to make sure that there are potential customers in place, that the note will be secured, and that all appropriate approvals of the building and the planning department be met. Staff, therefore, is recommending a $30,000 loan over a 5-year period at 5.5%, which is the terms of our loan program. This particular project will bring in 4 new jobs. Sales revenue is anticipated to be $120,000 a year. The property value will go up due to improvements and also the reassessment because of the change of title. The staff will answer any questions.
Any questions for Mark?
What are you using for collateral?
We're going to secure the note through, we're doing a title search, and a deed of trust will be drawn on the property or on the home, depending what we need to secure the $30,000.
Okay, the property, how much was paid for it and how much do they owe on it?
We have those financial records back in the office.
And the equity in the property is sufficient to cover our...
We're going to do the title search, and at that time it will reveal what is necessary to secure the note for the $30,000. We haven't done this portion of it until council gives us approval, because there is a substantial cost involved, which will be borne by the Souzas.
How can we approve it if we don't know what the information is?
It will be approved under these conditions that the note has to be secured.
Oh, okay.
That we will.
Do you have any business plans from them or
Yes, we do.
Pro forma financial statements?
We have, yes, financial statements, tax returns, business plans.
Okay.
The only thing that I would like to see is a list of the potential clients. They're already there are verbal agreements, but just a list of the clients who will, especially the machine shop. It's a very specialized work that Mr. Souza will be doing, and that will guarantee that the business will go forward.
Okay, then somewhere along the line, I guess if I can come in, I'd like to go over being a former banker, I have to go through this thing.
Okay.
So
I'm taking this stuff to the title company once the approval is received, and then we'll get the...
Okay. I'd like to go over all the information with you.
All right.
Well, I like this. I like to see entrepreneurs and people take on new businesses, particularly in town. When's the last time that someone has actually applied for these city funds?
We've had, now that you've asked, just happen to have, we've had 7 businesses who received support from our facade program. These businesses are primarily in drawings or so forth, someone coming in saying what would look pretty here. We've had 6 grants issued. We've had 2 major loans issued, one for the painting of the Nice-Pythias building and one for the Texaco station. We've also had a revolving business loan granted to Mr. Bigelow as he moved to the new site down on N Street. Sometimes these loans aren't, the purpose of the loans is to stimulate business, is to improve the facade, and it's nice to see an applicant that's actually going to do that. We have passed out grants to parties who are just maintaining their buildings, painting the buildings. The work has already been done. Architectural review wasn't required or asked for because the work has already been done, and the funding, has gone out for that. So it's really nice to see an applicant coming through with meeting the purpose of this program. We have spent $14,000 in the grants and in the business support, $84,000 total with the loans and the business support, and with the revolving loan, the last one that we did approve for Mr. Bigelow, a grand total of $134,000 has been expended from the redevelopment agency for the purpose of improvement and business stimulation.
Thank you. Okay, when you set up your guidelines for these type of loans?
Yes.
Now, when we're talking about the collateral, you're talking about 100%?
That's usually, I have a committee that works with me with,
Oh, okay.
from San Juan Bank.
Good.
And they advise me, especially in this part of the sector I'm not familiar with, and they will say, yes, this is,
Okay.
yeah, if it's close, but we do try to secure, it is a business transaction.
Well, yeah,
So
just for your
we want to
information,
save,
through 37 years of banking, that, and it still holds true, that 50% of all businesses that start up go bust.
well, the property has been purchased. They are starting, I believe the machine shop is ready to start. All they're waiting for is just the final approval from PG&E. The pet store has gotten a lot of inventory from another feed store that's recently closed. This will just make their job easier. It's not like they, this is not going to make the difference between them failing or succeeding. They will start. They will achieve this. It's just that the city's role in making it easier for them, perhaps getting a little more stipulations on the appearance of the building and so forth is nice to, this is the purpose of the program.
Any other questions for Margaret? No? Thank you, Margaret. Mr. Navoa.
Bob Navoa, 940 Fresno Street. That's it. I'm here before you on behalf of the Newman Chamber of Commerce. They apologize for not having a board member here, but they all had other obligations, and they asked me to step forward and encourage the council to meet this with a positive result. And I would like to just also speak on my own behalf. And a little history: I was on the city council when we wrote this ordinance, and I appreciate Tom's concern and diligence in making sure that it will be repaid. However, if all of you would take a little bit of time and read the ordinance, you'd find that we wrote it pretty stiff at the time, and we wanted to make sure that the city didn't lose a dime over this, and I don't think to date that they have lost a dime over it. And so all the mechanisms are in place if the city just continues to do its job. If the city loses money over this, it's because the city didn't do their job. And so I encourage you to approve this. This is what we wrote this ordinance for, and it has a purpose, and this is the purpose. And I thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. Yeah. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
How excited are you about starting your business?
Are you going to have pets or just pet supplies?
Retail, eventually pets.
Okay. All right. Good.
We're gonna have, it's gonna be a feed store. We know the old feed store closed down, and it's needed
Right.
out here. And we just purchased,
Would you like to tell you what? Why don't you come up to the podium and then everybody out in television land can hear you too.
free
That's right.
We just purchased, Troy and Darcy Souza 620 Lady Slipper. This weekend, unfortunately, this person in Livermore lost his business, and we went in there and we bought everything from him. We paid cash for it. We have it now. What we need the money for is we need feed, and we need a truck, we need a forklift, and we need construction work done. Just like Margaret said, to speed up the process. And as far as, I'm sure 50% of businesses do go out of business, but on this property, we're gonna have 2 businesses going there. And the feed store is needed, and the trade I'm in, I've been doing it over 20 years, and I got a lot of connections, and I'm gonna get a lot of work from them once I get PG&E to put a telephone pole up over there, which is taking a while. But,
The value of the property, we paid $72,000 for it. The payoff on the loan is $68,000. When we initially looked at the property, the real estate agent had pulled up some other industrial area property that was for sale that had no existing buildings, had no water, had no power, and it was listing at $150,000. Our property is 1 acre. It has 2 buildings. It has power. It has sewer, and it has those type of capabilities. We want to make it look nice. We want to be here for a long, long time. So our full heart is going into the business.
I wish you all the luck in the world.
Thank you.
2 businesses, you already doubled your stakes.
I have talked to Brett Theodorzio, the ag department head at Gustine High School, and I will be supplying his ag children, the kids, with feed with them also, and the 4-H will be coming to me also. So
Looks like you've done your homework.
Yes, I have.
Done a lot of homework.
Done a lot of homework. And Dr. Wallace, Chief RN Veterinary Clinic, will be referring customers to me as I will to her. So we'll be working back and forth together that way too.
Good.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You may have to loan some of that money to PG&E to put that pole up too. Okay, do we have some direction on this?
I move that we approve a $30,000 revolving business loan for Troy and Darcy Souza for business located at 1604 M Street, provided it meets the criteria for the program.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Congratulations.
Yeah, good luck.
Item 11D, consider proposal from Bigelow Chevrolet to use RDA funds to assist in expansion of business.
This is something that we've been considering for quite some time. As you know, we assisted Mr. Bigelow when he moved to his current location. He currently has a $50,000 loan from the redevelopment agency from the same funding source that we just approved for the Souzas from our revolving loan fund. The current project before you is that we are working with Mr. Bigelow on is to purchase the property located across Inyo Avenue directly to the north of Bigelow Chevrolet. The city would then take the necessary dedications. Part of the concern and problem with that particular property is that there was a right turn lane proposed and required at Inyo Avenue, which would require dedication from that property. The city would look at purchasing the property, taking the dedications that we need for that area, and then selling the property back to Mr. Bigelow to use to expand his car dealership. We've looked at this briefly, and you have a report here from Mr. Bigelow which shows some good results that he has had since he has moved to his location, and he feels confident that he can expand this even more as he has the room to do that. If you've been down there to his lot, you can see that it's very crowded, even though if you were to compare the two, he did move to a little bit larger area, but not much, and just the configuration of the buildings, et cetera, has restricted what he's been able to do there somewhat. We would like, upon council's approval, to look at this further. We will begin talking to our redevelopment attorney to prepare a disposition and development agreement which would allow this to happen. As noted in this report, Mr. Bigelow is looking at, if you look at the memorandum from our finance director, Margaret Souza, we would still have to go through and look at what the actual price of the land is. We've proposed $185,000 in here. That's obviously we would have to go through the land purchase procedures for that. The lot size is 33,000 square feet. There's about 6,000 square feet that would be needed to provide for the right turn lane and other dedications that would be required by the city. We would then resell back to Mr. Bigelow after that land is reduced out of that. In addition to that, Mr. Bigelow has requested an additional $50,000, which we would finance for him to complete the improvements on that property. Total loan, and again, this is based on a figure of $185,000 that we're not sure that that's the correct figure yet, but total loan based on that would be $201,000. And you can see basically how Margaret has broken out in this, that the city would have to realize income of about $65,000 to make up what we would be losing. Based on the projections of what the business could do, we feel that we could recover that through tax increment and projected sales tax. Plus, we will be receiving, this is not a gift, this is a loan, and all of the money with interest would be paid back on top of this. Initially, what we have looked at with Mr. Bigelow, we've looked at a couple of different options. One would be for the loan to be a 15-year loan, all due and payable with a balloon payment in 10 years. And the other would be a 10-year loan with a balloon payment in 7 years. And those are some other factors that we will negotiate and work out with Mr. Bigelow as we move forward with this. What we're basically looking for tonight is a conceptual agreement by the City Council that they would like us to move forward with this project, because it will require us to expend some monies to have our redevelopment attorney prepare the agreement for this project. Additional information, I have to apologize to our Economic Development Committee and Susan Mattis. I asked her at last minute to write me a letter to provide to you, and I forgot to make the copies and bring that over to you. But she is here to provide that support. The Economic Development Committee that the city has did meet and discuss this project. I have to note that Mr. Bigelow is part of that committee, and he did simply provide information at the meeting and not make any recommendations accordingly on this, but he did provide information there. But the Economic Development Committee wholeheartedly supported this and felt that this was a very good project for the City Council to consider at this time. So with that, as I mentioned, Mr. Bigelow is here to answer questions. Susan Mattis, the chair of the Economic Development Committee, is here to answer questions. And then I can answer any, or Margaret Souza, our finance director, who prepared part of this report.
I see Mr. Novoa there again. Bob?
If I may, I thank you. And again, on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce Board, they asked me to step up and speak to this issue, and they also support this wholeheartedly and would like to see your support as well. Thank you.
I'm Susan Mattis, 744 Fresno Street, Hardin Road. I forgot where I live. Usually I'm at the office. As chairman of the EDC, I just want to let you know that I did take the time to write you a letter, but your city manager left it on his desk. Even though Mr. Bigelow is a member of our committee, this particular project has been a discussion, and you asked our committee to meet and begin to formulate some ideas and possible projects for you as a redevelopment agency to begin to work on. We took a little hiatus while we were trying to pass a school bond, and now we're back at it, and have been meeting wholeheartedly since that point, and have been kind of formulating a list of things that we would like to present to you, and this project was one of them that was brought to us. The committee as a whole is very supportive of the project. We realize that the amount of money for the project is more than you have expended in the past for any one single project, but it meets the criteria that has been brought forward for the redevelopment agency for these types of projects. Mr. Bigelow's business, as you know, is a high sales tax generator and is very beneficial to our community and to the city. And This particular project would increase employment in our community, would increase the payroll dollars available to other businesses, increases our sales tax basis for you as the city, and also increases property tax values, which is, pretty much fits the bill all the way around for redevelopment agency projects. So we do support it as a committee, and hope that you will also support that, and realize that those particular funds, that's what it's for. And we have a businessman who is willing to make a commitment and bring in further vehicles, expand his inventory, and try to provide better service for our community. And so we would hope that you would be willing to consider that as a viable project also.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience have any comments, or anyone on the council have any questions for anyone in the audience?
No,
Mr. Bigelow.
just Lloyd.
While he's coming up, can I make a correction on the first page of my report? The actual upfront cost required by the city would be $266,340 rather than the $216. That number left out the $50,000 in addition that was requested. So
266 what?
266,340.
Okay.
That's right here. This number.
Oh, this number.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of this, Lo?
Yes, I am. I am in favor of this.
On your financials here, you stated that you have about $1.1 million in flooring.
Yes.
Excuse me, inventory. Your new cars are floored?
Yes, sir.
How about your used cars? Do you own those, or?
I own about 3/4 of them.
Oh, okay.
Okay. They're, in fact, I just did this because of cash flow things in the car business. I just went over that yesterday, as far as my my used car inventory and my parts inventory, and I discovered I've got a lot of money sitting there that's just sitting there.
I handled 9 car dealers in the city of Santa Maria.
All right. Well, so you know the cash flow bill.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's this is this is a real good project. I think it's. When I moved down to this location, it really looked big, empty. And I'm not a real smart guy, but it's just too small. It's, if I was a customer of mine, I'd feel hesitant about pulling into the driveway because it's just so darn crowded.
I agree with you.
And I want to, if I had all the money in the world, I'd never come here and ask for this. I want you to know that. And if you, I've made a commitment to the community. I've tried to get involved. I'm involved in a lot of things. I want to pay back to the community, not just take. I expect to pay back every penny. I don't expect it to be given to me. And I just think it would be a good project. I think it would benefit everybody, not just me. I think it would benefit the city. It's developing a crucial area of Highway 33 there. You're going to widen the street. You're going to get a turn lane out of it, and I just think it'll help everybody. Plus, you'll get more money in the long run from tax dollars and added employment and that kind of thing.
What are your projections on how long you'll be there before you have to move again? What I'm trying to say is, you're still going to have limited space because we have 5 subdivisions on the books, and we're going to be building all these homes, and your business is really going to grow. Is that going to be adequate for you, or do you feel how soon you might have to move?
From where I'm at now, I'll be dead.
Oh, okay. That's what I want to hear.
No,
that was a bit morbid. But
no. It's I don't anticipate having to make another move. In fact, I don't really believe that I'm going to need that whole area over there for my cars. Okay, which means that there'll be some of it left over that can be used for something else. As the town grows, okay, there's possibilities for something else. And the population has to get to 10, 12,000 people for these things to happen, or it cannot support the unit.
Like an automated car wash?
that or possibly a quick lube. You know, something that this town, a lot of people could use that. You know, people drive to San Francisco, they work in the Bay Area, they get their cars serviced there because nothing's open here on the weekends. You know, they just don't have the. Oh, by the way, we're open on weekends.
I was waiting for the pitch. I really was.
I'm sorry.
Couldn't help yourself, huh?
Deduct that from the amount of the loan for advertising.
But no, I won't need the
section.
whole thing. I'll only need about half of it, I think. And you know, this town would have to grow to 15,000, 20,000 people, maybe even a little larger, before that size facility would be obsolete.
You're right, you'll be dead.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
Okay, any other questions for Lloyd? Okay. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
Thank you.
This is just to consider a proposal, so Cleve, can we turn that over to staff to
Yeah, that's fine.
Take it
the
further
impression I
and-
get, you want us to move forward with it.
Well, I really think that it should go forward, because how long has that dealership been in town, Lloyd? Yeah. Yeah. I think that we need to take care of our own here in the community as we, give them the chance to grow before we bring in new. And so therefore, I'm in favor of this. And with 5 new subdivisions coming in, I can see the business growing considerably. And so I'm in favor of it.
everybody else feel about the
Yeah, I
same?
think it's a good investment in the future
I
for
don't
our
think we need a
town.
motion for this, do we?
No.
Okay, all right.
I think it's a good idea.
Tim, you didn't say anything. You in favor of this?
Were you surprised at that?
No, I just, I don't want to comment. I just want a yes or a no.
No, I would hope that Lloyd is just as excited as the Souzas are with his expansion as they are with starting their businesses. No, I'm certainly favorable for the
Okay.
expansion of growth of business.
Thank you. All right, items of city manager.
Okay. Do we need to... Okay. Okay. Number 1 is attendance at the Standcog meeting. There's a meeting tomorrow night. I understand our member is Tom Applegate. who
And
is
I'm
unable to
I'm
attend.
the alternate. I actually rearranged my schedule to attend this meeting tonight, particularly because I didn't know that the streetscaping was going to be pulled, and so I'm going to be out of town on assignment. And so if you could actually attend in our absence, that would be consideration. So.
I would have to check with Standcog and see if someone else in the council can. I understand that they have my name as an alternate on there also.
They do, yeah.
I think you attended
Yeah.
the one meeting when we were both away
Right.
in January. So I think you may be a third alternate, if I'm not mistaken.
The reason I bring this up is the fact that this money that I've talked about, we discussed, I handed out a page, or actually I didn't hand out the page tonight, but there is a potential money, additional money that we might be able to pick up for the streetscape. And
Yeah, 165.
it's not a huge amount, but potentially I've
Every
looked at
little
about
counts.
$165,000 that we could pick up in addition to help us with our streetscape. And so I want to make sure that we're well represented there and can speak for us. It's on the consent calendar. I don't see a problem with it, but
Okay.
so I guess the council direction, they'd like me to attend that. And
Absolutely.
Yes.
absolutely.
That may not be it's a pretty good sum.
I think you are an alternate, so you can vote on it then.
Okay. I have to, that brings up one other item I was going to mention. I am actually going to be in San Francisco tomorrow. I was asked by the school district to make a presentation on their school bond. They're going before the rating agency tomorrow to get their ratings for the school bond. But initially what I've looked at, I should be back in plenty of time for that.
What time do you have to be there?
7.
No, what time do you have to be at the meeting in San Francisco?
In San Francisco, I have there's a 10 o'clock meeting with the insurance company in the morning, and then after lunch, I believe it's at 2 o'clock, with the rating agency.
And how long do you suspect
I'm
that to last?
assuming it will be done by 3 or 3:30.
Oh, you have plenty of time.
Yeah,
Or
3 or
later.
3:30.
Believe you me, you have plenty of time.
Yeah, 3:30, 3:30, you'll get home by 6.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I make the drive every day.
No, it will, yeah. So anyway, I will plan on attending that. Just wanted to run through some projects quickly. Inyo Avenue project. I keep telling you we're close. We are close with that one. Just today I heard, and I think we've got the railroad issue resolved. We still do have the billboard out there on the corner, which is an issue that we need to take care of. We're looking at the issue of either having that completely removed or relocated, and we're still working with the sign company to try to determine what can be done with that, what is the best solution for that. But we hope that will start soon. The railroad company told me today that they feel that their company that will actually do the crossing may be in here as soon as next week to do that work. So that will get done quite quickly. Next is the skate park. Haven't got any real information for you other than this Friday I'm going to try to go up to Sacramento. The Parks and Recreation Society conference is taking place up there, and I received a brochure on a company that does ramps similar to what we are looking at and what I talked about for the company in the Midwest that had given us a proposal on. So I want to go up to that and look at those, see if I can get a good look at what they have available up there.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Is that company local? The one that you
They're
received the brochures on?
Santa Rosa.
Oh, okay.
So
That makes
California.
things a little easier because,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's why I really wanted to go up there and see exactly what they have, so.
Okay, good.
Going to Alaska.
It is, a little closer than Alaska, yeah. The LM and Stanislaus project, I haven't got an update from our engineer, but they are working on the plans and those should be completed soon, and we can bring those back for asking to go out to bid on those. I just wanted to mention quickly the industrial park. We should have at your next meeting that final map ready to adopt. I just wanted to state that probably over the last week, for some reason, the interest in the industrial park has picked up considerably. I think I've had 5 people call me that are ready to move within about the last week that are interested in property down there and businesses. And I'm actually to a point now where I'm scrambling because it's turning out that there's more people than there is actually land to develop that is ready to develop right now. And so we're going to have to look at additional improvements to get the next phases of that going so that we can keep the momentum down there. The last thing is on the Damari property. We are still waiting for the consultant, I believe, right, Ernie, to come back with a recommendation on removal of the contaminated soil that came from there. We'll work probably in the very near future. We'll be able to move the concrete and fill in the hole. The last stage will just be to get the contaminated soil. There's a couple of options of how we can get rid of that, and we're exploring those, and hopefully the least expensive that will work for us. So that's the issue on the Damari property.
Unfortunately, we pretty much just got stuck with that bill, didn't we?
Correct.
Okay.
And I think that's all that I had, unless there's other things that the council had questions on different projects.
I think so. Yeah, see, let's get to the items, city council members. Can we make it kind of quick? We've run out of, how close are we on our tape, Judy? 5 minutes. Well, let's see. Let's start with John.
There goes the 5 minutes.
I have nothing, but Tim, keep it short. Huh?
I have nothing this evening.
It's not your turn.
Good.
Oh, my turn? Oh. I had to get out of bed to come down here, and I've been laid up for about 10 days now. Thank you, Susan. But I saw the agenda, and there was too many important items on here, and so that's why I came down.
That all you have to say?
That's it.
Oh, okay.
You're not contagious, are you?
Yes, I am.
Bob?
Just a comment, it's good to see the people out there. You know, it's always better when we have meetings like this and community's participating, and that's what it's all about. Thank you for being here.
We don't have any punch and donuts or cookies tonight, but... John?
No, I just hope, I have nothing, I just hope Tom's not contagious, that's all.
Oh, he's not, no. And the only thing that I have is, I want to thank our supervisor, Paul Caruso, for getting the county to fix the railroad crossing a little bit there at Stewart Road, so we don't lose
Oh,
the
they
bottom
did?
of our cars anymore. And now we have to work on the railroad to get a permanent fix on it, but at least he got that taken care of for us real quick.
Good.
And if there's nothing else, why...
I move we adjourn.
I second it.
all in favor?
Aye. Got me. That's what I was gonna say.